Welcome to the Core Women Podcast, the place for women entrepreneurs, authors, and self-starters looking to build community and gain valuable insights through expert interviews with women at the top of their game. Join your host, podcaster, producer, expert coach, entrepreneur, and author, Dr. Summer Watson, as she aims to inspire and empower you through these candid conversations. Lean in and embrace the journey. It's time to start the show. Here's your host, Dr. Summer Watson.
Today on the show, I would like to welcome Denise Archilla, who has her master's in social work, is a certified life coach, a former licensed clinical social worker, and a Montessori certified teacher with over 2 decades of experience providing support and management tools to warriors, and a mom of 2 young adults that also identify as warriors. We really have so much to talk about today, so let's just dive right into this and welcome Denise.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Well, I'm excited to have you. Before we delve deep into the aspects of your professional life, if you could describe your journey in one word to this point, what would that word be and why?
I would say the one main word I think that comes to mind is tenacity, but with a big dose of naivety mixed in. I say that because I just keep going. I always have. If I have, something that strikes me as like, oh, I want to do that, then yeah, I just, I do that. But a lot of times I do that without necessarily thinking things through. It's always worked out, but I do sometimes think that if I really thought about things a lot more, I might not have done the things that I've done. Sometimes I just do it and then kind of go, oh, okay, that's what this is about. So yeah, kind of a mix of those.
Those are wonderful. Tenacity, resiliency. This is fabulous. Let's talk a bit about your journey and how you identify as a warrior and why. And please tell us more about how you define what a warrior is.
There are so many different terms that are unifying to identify with when someone lives with chronic illness, rare disease, disability. And warrior is a very popular term right now. There are other words. Spoonie is one based on the spoon theory by Christine Miserandino. But warrior, I feel like, I don't know. I mean, you're fighting a battle every day. So many people, especially these days with mental health, in addition to physical health issues, it's a daily fight. It's a daily battle to keep going and take care of yourself and just doing all that has to be done. It can be very involved.
Let's talk about your experience having Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, hypermobility spectrum disorder, and how you've developed the habit of finding joy alongside of the pain. Tell us more about this and your journey as a warrior.
So I'm going to back up a little if that's okay. When
Sure,
I first
absolutely.
started on this journey, I had a degree in education. That was just not going to work for me, and trying to figure out what I wanted to do. Volunteered at Children's Hospital, Miracle Network Telethon, decided, oh, this feels right. But I still didn't know what I wanted to do. And I spoke with a social worker. They are pediatric oncology social worker. And that's what led me on my journey to get my master's in social work. I did that. I did pediatric medical for, oh goodness, I guess 11, 12 years. And toward the end of that, in my early to mid 30s, I started experiencing, some wrist pain and just different joint pain, kind of things. And I was still fairly young. Then I had 2 babies. And once my son was born, my second child, is when it just slammed into me. Like all this bilateral joint pain and fatigue, severe fatigue. And I thought I was going crazy. So before that, I've had symptoms my whole life, but I didn't know they were symptoms. I didn't know the hypermobility meant anything. I didn't know that premature birth could be related, or that the dysautonomia, where I would just pass out. I think I started that when I was about 16 or 17 years old, or having to rest after a shower. I just thought I was weak, or I just didn't see any big deal. And I wasn't experiencing pain, like I said, until my mid 30s. And then it really hit hard when I was 38 after my son was born. And so I was thought to have seronegative rheumatoid arthritis for about 13 years. It was when my daughter was 17 that she actually was having some issues. We thought she had POTS. She had dysautonomia, but it's not as severe as full-blown POTS. But the pediatric cardiologist was the one who started testing her. And that's where we found out she has hypermobile EDS. And he's like, this is what you have. And that just explained everything. It just made so much sense from that point. And I had happened to meet a number of young people with EDS, POTS, and dysautonomia early on, starting this part of my career. So I knew what it was. At the time, I think there were only 3 types of EDS. Now, I want to say 13, 14. I could be behind on that. I don't always keep up on the research of the types, but it's just changed so much, even in the last just 8 years. My particular issues are more right now around the chronic pain that I have. My daughter has gone back and forth with that. She tends to have more issues with the dysautonomia piece of it. It was one of those things that it came after the fact. And then my son also, like as you said, is a warrior. He was a preemie, had all kinds of medical issues growing up. And then at 14, experienced severe depression and anxiety, so much so that he had to do hospital homebound. So it's been quite a journey, with all of us.
You've had your own journey. Your children have had their journey. And there are a lot of people out there listening today that have a journey. You are passionate about coaching so many people, about coaching teens and young adult warriors and helping them build confidence and to find their voice and use their voice and empowering them to take leadership roles and advocating for their own health and wellness. So tell us more about how you've been supporting teens and young adults as warriors.
It really goes back to even when I was getting my degree in education. I found something I had written many, many years later, even back then, before I graduated with my bachelor's degree, where I was really advocating for the student voice, the young voice, that was important. And it was funny because then as I became a pediatric clinical social worker, one of my very first patients post MSW was a little 5-year-old with leukemia. And I won't go into the details of the story here for time, but suffice it to say, he didn't want to continue treatments. And he had as much understanding as possible of what that would mean. And his doctor and his parents really took that into consideration and allowed him to not have those treatments anymore. And that was the most powerful, I think, experience I've ever had of a patient voice being heard at a young age. That really changed my life, reflecting back on that, and then also working with a number of young people with cystic fibrosis and really empowering them to speak up and to be heard. And, sometimes there are situations with their journey where it's end stage. This was back in the early 90s. So it's different now than it was back then, and life survival is different. But, back at that point, I'd have end stage teenagers. And sometimes, doctors would want to be super strict about protocol, but this young girl wants to go to her prom or eat pizza and French fries. And it's at a certain point, it's like, listen to what she's saying, let's bring that voice into this. And so throughout, I have just felt very strongly that young voices, whether it was teaching and including them in an IEP meeting or whether it's a patient and their journey, I just feel like if it's happening to you, then your voice should be heard. And I think that as long as they're able to, I just feel like they should have a seat at the table, whether it's healthcare, education, or whatever it is in life.
Oh my gosh, that is so powerful. I've sat at those tables, those IEP, SST, those individual education plans. You never see a student. You rarely ever see. So for you to say that is incredible. And I'm sure that it's a tough battle with the administrators to have a child sit at the table.
Yeah, sometimes it is. And I've done that, and they don't, sometimes they didn't like to see me coming, because like, oh my gosh, here she goes.
Right.
But I just really feel strongly about it.
I love it because you're right. Whether young or older, we have a voice. And I love that you advocate for these young folks to have their voice. But you're also doing other things with different demographics, with women as well.
Yes.
And you facilitate a lot of groups and you bring a lot of people together to talk about similar experiences, whether that's a college student support group, chronic illness group, a LGBTQ plus health and identity support group, parents and children, living with long-term illnesses. You have so many groups that you do.
Yeah.
Where do you do these things? Tell us more about how you started this, how you're bringing people together today.
So I started back in 2015, and I really saw young people, teens and young adults that were living with chronic illness. I was seeing a lot of posts on Instagram, and you could just really see that they just wanted to be seen and heard and taken seriously, and for people to get it. And somehow I had this idea. I'm not a tech person, but I thought, oh, I want to do this online. So that was kind of part of my thought. And I thought I'd like to really bring them together and help guide them to empower each other and support each other and use the things that they have in common to relate and then support each other. The thought was not to do illness specific or disease specific groups. I just had this idea. I would like to bring them together across illness groups and more based on kind of where they are in life. So it started with teens and young adults. So that was just fairly broad and self-explanatory, but that's what we started doing. We were on Zoom back in 2015
Wow.
doing these groups. So it's just grown over time. And so now what I have discovered through this, and there are a number of studies now that I've seen and so many different kinds of peer support groups that have come up, including the one program that I am working with. You can see it when you're working and facilitating these groups, the power of peer support, because first of all, they get it. So it doesn't matter if you come in pajamas. It doesn't matter if you come with an NG tube. It doesn't matter if you come from a dark room. Nobody is asking all these questions or really treating you differently, right? They get you from the beginning that, okay, we all have our stuff and we all have something going on. And one person perhaps maybe needing to use a wheelchair for the first time in public. And, imagine being 16, 18, 20. And that's pretty daunting and, scary and all of those things for a lot of people. And so having someone else who's had that experience and can say, hey, here's what I did and how I dealt with it. And that and cheering each other on. The college group is great. They're all dealing with accommodations and those professors that just don't get things. And again, just they cheer each other on. There's a lot of humor. We laugh a lot in these groups. I feel so strongly with peer support. My women's career group yesterday is women with chronic illness navigating the workplace. And again, a lot of laughter, a little bit of commiserating, but we also are problem solving along the way too. They're very small, and I like to keep it that way so everybody gets to know each other.
I absolutely love and support what you do. This is fantastic. I think we all need a voice in that peer-to-peer relationship, just naturally and organically. When you have similar experiences, there's an immediate connection. I've done this with veterans, military veterans. And it has worked out incredibly well. I actually made a movie called Echoes from Afghanistan. It was about a unit of Marines that came back from Afghanistan. And to this point, about 30 of those Marines from that unit have committed suicide. And I wanted to do a movie about how these other young Marines were finding support since their return. And it was through peer-to-peer support. They felt most comfortable, where they felt they were getting the most help, the most insight, the most support. And then I talked to different people out in the community, a police force who, have to respond to veterans out in the community. And they actually have a force that is made up of veterans that responds to crisis situations in the community to bring down the crisis and maybe even eliminate that crisis. So that peer-to-peer support that you're talking about is so critical. And there's a ton of research out there that has been done about how important it is. So thank you for putting these groups together, knowing the importance of the person's voice, number one, and bringing together people who have a common theme that run through their life where there is that peer understanding. I loved it when you said an NG tube, because as a young warrior myself, I had an NG tube. I had lots of tubes coming out of me at a very young point in my life. And I spent a month in Sanford Children's Hospital at one, but nobody to talk to. My peers at school didn't know what the heck I was going through. I got cards, but they didn't really understand. And so the people I had to talk to were nurses or my doctors or my parents. but they had a different experience. So that peer-to-peer group interaction is so valuable. So thank you for being out there and bringing these groups together and really supporting people who are warriors, who have a voice but don't maybe know how to use it or find the help that they need. So we've covered so much. You've had this incredible journey. You helped so many. You've built these programs. So as we come to the close of the interview, my last question is based on your tagline, which is, because chronic doesn't mean can't. I'd like you to provide one tip that can help with a can-do mindset.
Wow, one tip. What I see is, we're here for this journey. There's a lot of negatives that are going to happen, and this is for anyone, not just someone with, chronic illness, but for all of us, I think we're just going to have life. Life is going to come at us and we're going to have these ups and downs. And I feel like the more we can purposely look for the silver linings or look for the smallest glimmers of joy or hope, and then be very intentional about finding those. And I think if we can do that, then when we get knocked down, what is the alternative? You can stay down or you can get back up. We all are going to get knocked down. We all have this experience. We can stay there, or we can say, hey, I'm going to take a little control back in my life and I'm going to get up. I feel like it starts with those tiny little steps and then being more intentional. And then over time, that becomes more powerful and easier to find. I see this resilience live itself out every single day with the people I work with. And when I see that, it doesn't mean you don't have the difficulties. It doesn't mean we're not going to get knocked down or be sad or whatever, but we can turn that around and incorporate it into our journey and keep going.
Thank you, Denise, for joining me on the Core Women podcast today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. This has been really nice to spend some time with you.
Oh, thank you. You can follow Denise Archilla on Facebook at Chronic Warrior Collective, on Instagram at Chronic Warrior Coaching, on LinkedIn at Denise Archilla MSW, and at chronicwarriorcoaching.com.
Thank you for joining us on the Core Women podcast with Dr. Summer Watson. We're so glad you're here and would love to connect more with you. Find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Core Women, and on Twitter at Core Women 1. For more about Core Women and Dr. Watson, visit corewomen.com. Want more support and resources for amazing women like you? Great! Join Dr. Watson and Jen Fontanilla at the Life, Love, and Money Collective, a Core Women production that aids in understanding the key traits that might be getting in the way of living a life that you are absolutely passionate about. Connect with Summer and Jen and find out more at thelifeloveandmoney.com.